Warning, contains adult language, adult content. Listener discretion is advised.
I just wanted to stand with him during the national anthem to show my support for him, and was appalled by what I had learned.
The most incredible, non-competitive moment in sports I'd ever seen.
The entire NASCAR family rallied behind my son. They loved him for the person that he is, not because of skin color or anything like that.
What did it mean when all those people who were so silent on that chat 2 weeks earlier?
Oh, I still don't forget. But this moment was still important. You can let down your guard a little bit, but I don't forget the ones that were silent.
Rob, wake up. No. Rob, wake up. No. TV's Rob is unwoke. TV's Rob is unwoke. He's unwoke.
All right, well, welcome to it. It is TV's Rob is Unwoke. I am your very unhumble host, TV's Rob, and oh my goodness, I teased this on Twitter, and I'm delivering. The ESPN E60 documentary on Darrell Wallace Jr., a.k.a. Bubba, known as Fistful of Steel, The Rise of Bubba Wallace. I sat through 90 minutes of this, and I made a lot of notes. That's right, I made a lot of notes to share with you my general review of it. And I spent 90 minutes being pissed off. Just pissed off. Bubba Smooye. See what I did there? I took Bubba, but I made it Bubba. And the whole Juicy Smooye from Dave Chappelle. So it's now Bubba Smooye. You're welcome. But Bubba Wallace and ESPN have officially signaled the end of NASCAR. And NASCAR itself, through the actions or inactions of current leadership, including NASCAR President Steve Phelps, has officially splintered and alienated its fan base. I've been a NASCAR fan since the mid to late 90s, when I went to my very first race at Texas Motor Speedway. Before I went to the race, I mocked NASCAR. I said, oh, look, it's a bunch of guys turning left. Oh, another left turn. He's going down the straightaway and another left turn. NASCAR is a sport that once you go out to the track and you see it and experience it in person, it really becomes something that you enjoy. For me, it was the mechanics of it all, how they take these engines and they build them up and they're cranking out all of this horsepower, and how precise the car bodies are, and the tires and the smells and the sounds. Oh, it was a great time for me to go to the track and watch the races. And I've been out to a lot of races out at Texas Motor Speedway since the second year that the track was open, and been a fan of NASCAR ever since. Got to cover the sport for a little bit working for ESPN here in Dallas, and had a blast doing that. But as a fan, I'm telling you, Bubba, ESPN, and NASCAR have splintered and alienated their fan base. And all it took was this documentary film. The last bastion of sports that had for the longest time been tucked away from the woke political mob has now been ruined. The culprits, ESPN. ESPN is literal garbage. There is a reason that over the past decade, ESPN has continued to plummet in the ratings, change its programming, lose a lot of play-by-play contracts, and that's because they're no longer about sports. See, ESPN stands for Entertainment and Sports Programming Network. Unfortunately, now it's become the Entertainment, Sports, and Politics Network, because that's what they've done. They've jumped headfirst into this whole political, racial division, woke mob mentality, and it shows with this documentary. And what's really upsetting about this particular documentary is the person who was doing it. Ryan McGee, a guy who has covered the sport for years and years and years, is helping to push this agenda. And I want to blame him, but at the same time, I am of the belief that he's just doing the job. He's doing the job. He's doing what his bosses are telling him. Hey, go do this. You're a NASCAR guy, go do this. And what else can he do? What other choice does he have other than to say, screw you, I quit? But there's not a whole lot of places he can really go to. So if you want that paycheck, sometimes you got to do what you don't want to do. But ESPN, the Mickey Mouse Sports Network has been doing this for far too long, and they've encouraged it for far too long, even though they say, oh, we don't want to be political. Well, guess what? You're political, assholes. That's all there is to it. You are political. You are a political megaphone for crap these days. When an ESPN host stops a show to talk about the verdict in the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, and then tries to tell you that black people were killed by Kyle Rittenhouse, you know where ESPN is going. They've gone full bore into identity politics and divisive racial talking points. That is what they've done. You can't deny that. And now with this documentary, they've decided that they're going to rewind the clock back to another hate crime hoax with Bubba Wallace. The award-winning E60 documentary called Fistful of Steel, The Rise of Bubba Wallace. Now, ESPN did a great job of letting you know that E60 is award-winning. I don't know what awards it's won. I guess I could look that up, but screw it. They tell you that it's award-winning every time they go to a commercial break and every time they come back from a commercial break. The award-winning E60 is presented by Liberty Mutual. Really? What awards has it won? Again, don't know, don't really care. I'm going to guess that by constantly reminding you that it's award-winning, that somehow it means that this is credible and you must believe everything that is said during the course of this program. So what happened here? I'm going to give you a segment-by-segment breakdown of this documentary about Darrell Wallace Jr. TV's Rob here. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First and foremost, it's free. We all like free, right? There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer, making it a lot easier than the way that I go about it. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more, saving you the time, energy, and effort of having to do it yourself. It is a pain. You can make money from your podcast as well with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. And if you start up a podcast using Anchor, I'll be your first guest. Now, before I get to my review, you may be asking yourself, TV's Rob, why did you take so many notes? Was it really that important? Well, I have to cue you in on a couple of things. One, it's what I do for a living. If I have to type up a show rundown or take notes on anything, I'm taking notes and they're detailed, especially if the subject matter pisses me off. I'm really going to be taking some notes because I really want to share what's going on. At the same time, this whole documentary and the situation got brought up after a show one day this past week, and I was sitting there so lit and livid that I just started spewing my thoughts right there in the studio, surrounded by people that you may know. And originally there was talk about it maybe being covered on one of these other shows, but that didn't happen. And I said, I really got to watch this. And I tried to find it online, tried to find it streaming somewhere, and it wasn't out there. Now, if I were an ESPN Plus subscriber, I could watch it at any time. Well, guess what? I'm not an ESPN Plus subscriber, nor will I ever be an ESPN Plus subscriber. But I did notice on DirecTV that they were doing a re-air of it at 1 o'clock in the morning on some random night. So I decided, hey, you know what? I'm going to record it on my DVR and I'll watch it later. And that's exactly what I did. And it's amazing how quickly I came to regret this decision. But I teased it on Twitter. I said I was going to do it, so here we are. I am delivering. You can't say I'm not a man of my word. But 90 minutes of this was a bit much. And what's funny is I could have turned it off at the 23-minute mark and had everything I needed for this. But let's take it from the top. The episode starts with a story from 2011. When Bubba Wallace was just a mere 18-year-old guy. He was driving down the road, and there was an incident where, road rage was involved, and he was the instigator. Now, he says that, there was this Jeep, and they were driving slow, so he crosses the double yellow line to get by him on this 2-lane country highway. And when he gets around them, all of a sudden, the Jeep pulls up beside him and they're telling him he needs to pull over to this parking lot, when they reach a stop sign. And Bubba just sees 3 white guys in this vehicle, and he goes ahead and pulls into that parking lot, and he sees the 3 guys get out, and they've all got guns. Well, come to find out, they were actually police officers, and they were actually giving him a citation for, crossing the double yellow line, speeding, not signaling. But he says that when the cop asked him a question about the vehicle, asking him if he could afford it, Bubba could have said, well, yeah, I could afford it. I could probably buy one for you and your crew here. No problem. But he didn't say that because he realizes he could have been another George Floyd. So the cop is racist because he saw a young black man in a car, in an expensive car, and asked him if he can afford it. Well, I'm sorry. It's not because you're black. It's because you're young. If you're 18 years old driving in a fancy car, cops are going to be having questions regardless of your color, okay? Because 18-year-olds usually don't have great-looking cars. So that's how the episode opened. Then it cuts to the actual produced open. And it features Rage Against the Machine, and you have clips from all these people in NASCAR singing his praises. Oh, he could be a game changer. He could be this. He's an influential guy. He's an influencer. He's got, he's so wonderful, so great. Yeah. Okay. All right. Whatever. Within 7 minutes of this program, ESPN had already alluded to the fake news story of 2020. Yay. Then they call him an influencer because he led the charge on getting NASCAR to ban the Confederate flag from tracks. We get to learn the so fascinating story about why he's called Bubba, and we get to hear about his childhood, when he started racing. And one of the quotes that he says that he's not sure he loves racing, but he does it because it's fun. We also learn in this first segment that his mother obviously sees life through the lens of color and race because she would go to races to count black people in the stands. Shouldn't you be watching what your son is doing on the track instead of counting the amount of black people in the stands? I don't understand why this is always brought up. Who cares? Just if you enjoy the races, go to the races. Doesn't matter what color you are. But whatever. Mother obviously sees it this way. Now, we did learn about a tragedy in the family where his cousin was killed by a cop after a night of drinking. Bubba's mom makes it seem like it was racially motivated, though when you hear the details of the story, you're left to ponder and question. That is not for me to get involved in. That is heavy stuff, and that's not my bag, all right? Now, we learned that being in racing is obviously dangerous for a black kid because the white kids are racist. His white father, mind you, his white father instilled a racist demeanor in his son, saying that, oh, well, the officials inspecting your car more closely is because they thought he was cheating because he's black. So officials inspecting cars after races, they're racist if you're black and you win the race, because obviously they don't want you to win a race. Plain and simple. In 2011, we get to hear a story about how he won at Richmond in a lower level series race. And in the interview with his mom, she points out that afterwards, the only black people at this track at Richmond, Virginia, which apparently is right next to a black neighborhood, the only black people there were the ones cleaning up the trash. So much racism. Then we learned that in 2011, he was pulled over again for failing to signal crossing state lines. Cop was obviously a racist because he asked him if he had anything illegal in his car. The area he was pulled over in apparently has an issue with cars coming across state lines and having illegal contraband. So again, not necessarily racism, more or less cops doing their job. Now, of course, his white father says that he was pulled over only because he was black. And his mother had to black-splain to the white father that he will never understand what it's like to be black in America. Oh, black-splaining, everything's racist. Oh my goodness, he's the victim and everything. He can't just show up in race and not be persecuted because he's black. Well, in 2013, we learned that he begins racing in the Truck Series, which is a NASCAR-sanctioned national series, and he becomes the first black driver in 50 years to win a NASCAR race. Hooray! And this was just the first 23 minutes. How bad are you just banging your head up against the table right now, or the wall, or whatever, face palming, whatever you've got in front of you to just mash your head into? How bad are you doing that right now? Oh, it's great. But there's so much more. Let's pause a moment here to talk about protein bars. Do you like a good snack throughout the day, but you'd rather not pack on the pounds while doing it? Well, hey, I've got great news. Built Bar is here to save the day. They've got so many flavors. There's something for everyone. When you talk to a Built Bar fan, like me, they're passionate about their favorites. They've got amazing flavors like coconut, which is death for me, but hey, maybe it works for you. Mint brownie, which I love. Double chocolate, salted caramel, cookies and cream, which is great, and more. Hey, if you can't pick a flavor right off the bat, you can get a mixed box. What is a mixed box? You'll get 2 of each of their 9 regular flavors. Built Bars have up to 18 grams of protein, and they're 180 calories or less. Only 4 to 5 grams of sugar, and only 4 or 5 net carbs. But you wouldn't know it by tasting them, because they taste amazing. You can take care of your sweet tooth and still be healthy. How about that? And now you can get your Built Bars even faster. How? Check this out. The new URL is built.com. It's no longer builtbar.com. You get to save 3 letters. Think about the time it takes for you to type in BAR. Now you don't have to do it. And for you, the loyal audience of TV's Rob is Unwoke, Built Bar is giving you a discount off your first order. Go to built.com and use the promo code TV's Rob to save 10% off your first order. Use promo code TV's Rob for 10% off at built.com.
He's Unwoke.
All right, so we got through segment 1, 23 minutes in. And at this point, I'm still sober because I wanted to make sure that I had clarity of mind to take notes so I can share this all with you. But it was painful. The first 23 minutes, that first segment was painful. But we soldiered on. Segment 2 opens up, and we get a little bit of a history lesson in NASCAR. We get to see Danville, Virginia, and ESPN immediately points out on this award-winning E60 how it was the last stronghold of the Confederacy with a racist history of lynching and slavery. but it's also home to NASCAR Hall of Famer Wendell Scott, the last black driver to win a NASCAR race. We get a history lesson on Jim Crow era NASCAR racing. We learn how Wendell was screwed out of his rightful win by a racist track operator back in the 60s. Then we jump forward to 2014. Bubba honors Wendell Scott with a special paint scheme and has Scott's family there in attendance. He wins the race at Martinsville, and he brings the whole Scott family there for the celebration. Now, I'll give him credit. It was a touching tribute to a pioneer in NASCAR, a NASCAR Hall of Famer. Hooray. The optics were good there. There wasn't, oh, Wendell Scott didn't get to keep the trophy back in the 60s. He wasn't even declared the winner till later on because they couldn't have a black guy in victory lane. None of that was all brought up. It was just a nice, touching tribute to a pioneer in NASCAR. All right, so that was all of segment 2. Segment 3. We get to learn a little bit about Bubba's family, his family life. We get to learn about the falling out that Bubba had with his father. How he gets into a fist fight with him. And he starts crying because he lost his best friend. Apparently, his parents had a disagreement. And there may have been some domestic issue. But Bubba doesn't know the details. He doesn't know what happened. He just knows that mom's upset. And dad obviously did something, so he goes to dad's house, he punches dad, and, obviously the dad's the racist there because he obviously did something to his black mom, and he just won't stand for it. And, of course, talking about the parents and getting divorced and everything, he starts crying on camera. Guess what, kid? Tons of people go through divorces. Okay? Tons of families are split up. You ain't no different from anybody else. Now, ESPN does something in this segment that I found really interesting. And that is Ryan McGee asks Bubba's father what caused the fallout between he and Bubba. And he doesn't want to answer it. He just says, it's personal. Well, he's obviously a racist for not wanting to talk about it. Otherwise, that piece right there should have been left on the cutting room floor because it added nothing to the story, added nothing to the topic. It was literally there to shame his father and basically paint him as a racist for not wanting to answer a question as to what caused the fallout between he and Bubba. Why would you leave that in? But for some nefarious reason like that. ESPN diving right into the divisiveness, diving right into identity politics, diving right into painting everybody who's white as a bad guy. That's what they did right there. But they didn't spend a whole lot of time on that because they talk about how in 2017, Bubba Wallace gets tapped to drive the number 43, the most famous car in NASCAR for one, the King, Richard Petty. And they drag his dad right back into it because Bubba texted his dad about getting the job. And the response his father gave was not what he was hoping for. And immediately, he starts talking about, he doesn't read the text, but he starts crying again. He says he still has it saved. Then we get to take a trip down memory lane to 2018 with his Daytona 500 debut. His father wasn't there. His father said it was a tough time, and it was a hard time. And he wanted to be there, but it was really hard, so he wasn't. Now, Bubba finishes second in this race. Trash talks Denny Hamlin a little bit after a post-race interview. Cries in the media center. Just so... Oh my God, just came down. He thanks his mom and his sister and his aunt and his white girlfriend for being there and supporting him, but he doesn't thank his dad, even though his dad funded his racing career from the get-go. Huh. Funny how that works out. Richard Petty praises him, saying, hey, great job, but you wrecked my car. Told you not to wreck my car, but hey, he stops his interview and he gives his mama a big old hug and he's crying the whole time. Bah! And now we cut back to present day and this interview with Ryan McGee, and he's crying again, even more, because Daddy wasn't there. Daddy wasn't there. I mean, it's like Austin Powers. You have that song going through your head. Daddy wasn't there. Take me to the fair. Change my underwear. I mean, oh my God, so much crying. And at the same time, I have Tom Hanks in my head going, there's no crying in NASCAR.
Because there's no crying in baseball. There's no crying in baseball. No crying.
Then we go to another commercial break where we get to learn again that E60 is award winning. And we come back from commercial break again, learning that E60 is award winning. And in this segment, we start off learning a little bit about the softer side of Bubba Wallace. You know, like, what are some of his hobbies? Well, apparently, he really likes photography, and he really likes photographing clouds. Ryan McGee asks him to describe 2020 in a picture, and he said, a bald eagle flying over a dumpster fire in the rain with a rainbow in the background. Now, I will not disagree with him. 2020 was a dumpster fire. 2020 was just the absolute worst until 2021. I mean, let's be real here. 2020 was really bad, but 2021, I think, shaped up to be worse. I don't know how, but it was worse. Then we get to revisit the events of one Kyle Larson in April of 2020 on iRacing, dropping the N-word, losing his job, losing his sponsors, losing this, losing that.
I can see it. You can't hear me? Hey, wow, big. Kyle, you're talking to everyone, bud. Yeah, we heard that.
Bubba tells us about a phone call he received from Larson to apologize for it. And Bubba says he wasn't offended, but says Kyle's fucked. Wow. So the guy who's supposed to be so influential and such an influencer in NASCAR, when this guy who is of Asian American descent, okay, Asian American, he's the first Asian American in NASCAR, you say he reaches out to you and you just tell him he's fucked. You do nothing to say, dude, bro, I got your back and everything, but look, we need to have a talk about this, all right? That word needs to be out of your vocabulary. Seriously? What a piece of shit Bubba Wallace is. When a guy was down, he just decided to kick him. He doesn't do anything to uplift him. No, instead he just kicks him when he's down. Then we see in 2018, an interview with ESPN. Bubba says that seeing the Confederate flag at a racetrack doesn't bother him. He's going to go play cornhole with the rednecks just like anybody else would. And guess what? Those rednecks would be just as accepting of him as anybody else. But there we get to see where everything started to change, where the mindset starting to change, the mentality of Bubba Wallace really started to change. And that is, we get to see the George Floyd incident. We get to see all these other incidents because ESPN is playing all this great B-roll of these police and other people killing all these black people and how Black Lives Matter came to be and how uplifting and everything it is for Bubba, because now Bubba pushes for NASCAR to speak out, gets on a text chat with a bunch of other drivers, and he tells them that they all need to start speaking out. Well, the drivers don't want to because, one, sponsors are saying, don't do it. Don't speak out on this. We don't need to get involved in this. And team owners don't want drivers getting involved in all this. They don't want their sport to be politicized. Well, guess what? Bubba doesn't care. Bubba wants NASCAR to be politicized because it's all about him now. But I found it interesting while ESPN is showing all these images and everything, they conveniently omit all the riots. You know, the peaceful protests where buildings were being destroyed and looted and businesses were being burned to the ground. Oh, we left all that material out because that doesn't push the narrative. So while these drivers are hesitant to speak out, Bubba decides that he's going to take it on himself. He's going to put the whole world on his shoulders. Well, Steve Phelps, NASCAR president, decides, you know what, maybe it's time to have the conversation about banning the Confederate flag altogether. Now, a few years prior, they actively discouraged people from flying the flag and bringing the flag to the track, but they weren't doing anything about it. Now, we're going to ban it because Bubba said to. And of course, we have to be woke and we have to say, you know what, this is a symbol of hate. We don't want it around our sport. We don't want it in the infield. We don't want it flying anywhere near the track. Other drivers who are from states that have state flags that carry the Confederate flag stopped adorning their driver suits and their cars with those flags because, oh, they don't want to be anywhere close to a symbol of hate. This ESPN writer pushes all this bullshit about black people and white people, obviously just being racist and saying all white people are bad, which, gee, big surprise there, right? Jimmy Johnson, 7-time Cup Series champion Jimmy Johnson, weighs in and shows just how much of a beta male he is. Then we show clips of Bubba going on CNN with Don Lemon and calling for the Confederate flag to be banned and going on all these other news programs talking about it, and says that, you know, anybody who says, you know, keep politics out of sports, it's not his problem. It's the people who react that are making it political. He's not making it political. They are, because they're reacting. And mind you, I'm only at about the halfway point. And again, still sober. Becoming increasingly hard, but hey, working on it. Such a joke. So ridiculous. So now we're in 2020. Bubba's mother says he's got a lot of enemies out there now. Bubba blows up on the national media scene. And the entire time, he's just burying the sports fans with everything he's talking about. Just burying them. Not doing anything to uplift the sport or say, you know, there's a lot of division and hate out there right now, but NASCAR, we had that one guy screw up, but we're not like that. No. He buries the sport and buries the fans. And that brings us to June 21st, 2020. The place, Talladega Superspeedway, which happens to be in Alabama, the state that Darrell Wallace Jr. was born in. But apparently it's not home anymore. I don't know. For the first time in his life, Darrell Wallace Jr. has a security detail with him. His dad was scared. His mother was scared. His family was scared. NASCAR was scared for his safety because this was the first race at Talladega Superspeedway since the ban of the Confederate flag. Some fans didn't take too kindly to that. Group of people paid to have the Confederate flag flown over the track on a banner that said defund NASCAR. There were protests outside of the track, people selling Confederate flags outside of the track. Now, mind you, not many fans were allowed in to Talladega for this race. And in fact, the protocols called for essential personnel only. But this is where we get the noose. This is the weekend of the noose. NASCAR President Steve Phelps calls Bubba Wallace for a meeting. And he tells Bubba there has been a hate crime committed at the track. A hate crime? There was a noose found in the garage. It's a hate crime, and it's directed at you because it happened to be in your garage stall. He brings in the FBI to do an investigation, and he promises We're going to find the son of a bitch that did this, and we're going to run him out of the sport because this has no place in our sport. Steve Phelps perpetuated this whole noose narrative. I say it was obviously a desperate attempt for headlines. He takes that strong stance, threatening to ban whoever put it in there. The FBI arrives. They do an investigation. I said from the moment it happened, it ain't going to be a noose. It's going to be a garage pull rope. Now, as far as garage pull ropes are concerned, that thing was made really well, and it was very intricate, and yes, it did look like a noose. But you look at the type of rope it was, how big it was made, there's no way you're hanging somebody from it. The purpose it was made to serve was pulling a garage door down, not hanging a person. But what do I know? All of a sudden, these silent drivers that Bubba talked about stage a Stand with Bubba campaign based on what they had learned, like you heard Jimmy Johnson say at the beginning of the show. They push his car to the front of the starting grid on pit road. The king, Richard Petty, is there. Now, at the time of this, NASCAR COVID protocols did not allow for team owners to be in the garage area. It only allowed essential crew members to work on the car. The drivers weren't even allowed in the garage area. The drivers had to stay in their haulers or their buses before race time. NASCAR allows Richard Petty to come to the track to show support for his driver. And these guys who are pushing Bubba's car to the front of the grid, you have the entire NASCAR garage area that was there at the track at the time. And of course, people on SiriusXM and people on the TV media were saying, in that crowd, there's somebody who put that noose. Now, the interesting thing about the timeline of all this is that the FBI actually reported to Steve Phelps before this show of solidarity that Bubba's mom was oh so proud about, that there was no hate crime. And they even found evidence showing that it was there in 2019 when the garage stall was assigned to Ryan Blaney, who obviously is not black. But Steve Phelps didn't release those findings till after the race. How does Steve Phelps get away with that? How does NASCAR get away with that? Seriously. So the FBI releases their findings, and Bubba's sister says the results are bullshit. She's convinced that that noose was there to send a message to her brother, even though it was there well beforehand. At this race, there was a group of people in the stands wearing Black Lives Matter shirts, and apparently it was their very first NASCAR race. Bubba breaks COVID protocol and goes over there and starts like high-fiving and fist-bumping all of them, taking selfies and all that. Yet nothing happens to him. And this was at the height of the pandemic where everybody was freaking out. Everybody was in lockdown. Everybody was panicked over what was going on. And yet he's able to do that and get away with it with not a word. Not a word. Steve Phelps comes out afterwards and says, hey, it was a good thing that it wasn't a hate crime. But he was the guy who instigated the whole storyline to begin with. Bubba says, that's not just a rope. That's not just some fisherman's knot. That's a noose. Plain and simple. Even today, that's what he believes. It's a noose. If you don't agree with him, go fuck yourself. I mean, seriously? Then we get to learn just how racist NASCAR fans really are at the All-Star race of 2020 at Bristol Motor Speedway in Tennessee. During driver introductions, he gets booed.
Starting sixth in the number 43 World Guide Technology Chevrolet from Mobile, Alabama, Bubba Wallace!
Which apparently now makes you racist. And it makes Bubba angry, saying, you live your life, I'll live mine way better than yours. What a cocky, arrogant son of a bitch. Later in 2020, we get the 2311 announcement. Michael Jordan, his airness comes to NASCAR and team ownership and taps Bubba Wallace to drive his new car. In 2021, at Talladega, the scene of the crime, the hate crime of 2020, which NBC did not pass up the opportunity to remind you about. Bubba scores his first Cup Series win thanks to rain. We jump to an interview with his mother, and the mother says, nothing will ever be simple for Bubba. Racist white people will always scrutinize him. And then Bubba tries to say something profound, but honestly, it fell on such deaf ears that I couldn't care less what he said. I'm sure it was blah, blah, white people bad, white people racist, I'm great, whatever. So there you have it, the breakdown and rundown of Fistful of Steel, the Rise of Bubba Wallace, from the award-winning E60 series of documentaries. I had to make sure I threw that in there one more time. Award-winning. Now, just to backtrack a little bit, I got to go back to that whole news thing because it was absolutely ridiculous. Everyone in NASCAR was being forced to symbolically march behind Bubba Wallace and bend the knee to Bubba, this whole hate crime hoaxer scenario, perpetuated by Steve Phelps, NASCAR president. And then, of course, encouraged by, implemented by, and executed by Bubba Wallace. The mom saying, it was so powerful when all the racial hatred that was going on in the country to see what NASCAR did for my boy. What? I mean, the NASCAR community is a very tight-knit community. If you mess with one, you mess with them all. So yeah, NASCAR was going to spring into action when they thought something was going down. But when NASCAR found out that there was nothing going down, for them to push that along, they knew it was going to grab headlines. They knew it was going to be front page. It was going to be top of mind. It was going to get all the clicks and the impressions. They perpetuated this whole hate crime hoax. And of course, Bubba saying, I don't forget the people that were silent when I was kneeling for the national anthem, when I was saying Black Lives Matter. I don't forget. You could let your guard down, but I don't forget. Well, guess what? I won't forget that you're trash. Plain and simple. Here we are a year and a half later, and ESPN was still pushing that bullshit story. And of course, other people like USA Today and other news outlets were going along with it. LeBron James going along with it. And now we have fallout from this documentary. Now, of course, some of this is legitimate news. Some of this is my own personal opinion, but I've been in this game long enough to know that when you see certain things, you start to put the pieces together and you start to see the pattern, you start to see the puzzle take shape. This is what's going on. M&M's Mars leaving Kyle Busch, Joe Gibbs Racing after the 2022 Cup season, at the end of their contract, basically. Longtime sponsor M&M's, which has been with Kyle Busch for 2 Cup championships, will be leaving NASCAR after the 2022 season, ending a partnership with the number 18 Toyota that began in 2008 with Joe Gibbs Racing, but dates way back, well before then. We're talking in the 90s, okay, when Ernie Irvan was driving a Skittles car, Elliott Sadler, Ken Schrader driving an M&M's car, David Gilliland drove an M&M's car for a little bit. Then Kyle Busch has been driving it since 2008. 55 Cup Series wins, 2 Cup titles. Now, apparently Mars wants to try some new things. And no matter how big a brand is, they have a finite budget. So when you want to try something new, it has to come from somewhere else. Well, I thought Mars was a candy company, right? M&M's, Skittles, Wrigley. But I guess not. Remember, this is also the company that ditched Uncle Ben, okay? I'm going to guess in this new age of woke NASCAR, woke car, Mars sees the writing on the wall and they're saying, you know what, we're going to get out of here. And this is the first real big domino to fall. Now, of course, Mars is a candy company or a food company. They have various different things. Well, apparently they are more interested in being woke than actually doing anything good. When I was tweeting about this story involving Kyle Busch, I had to look to see, okay, well, what's Mars's Twitter handle? Okay, Mars Global. Wait, that doesn't look like Mars. What is this? Click on it. Oh my God, this is a company that is insane. Here's some of their tweets. October 5th. In the world we want tomorrow, the planet is healthy. That's why we're committing to achieving net zero emissions across our full value chain by 2050. December 10th. Understanding our supply chains and who works across them is a fundamental step in creating a world where everyone can thrive and the planet is healthy. December 17th. We are seeking to foster an equitable workplace with inclusion and diversity at its heart. Hear from Erica Coletta on how our associate resource groups work to ensure that all associates feel heard and valued. November 23rd. Imagine a world in which our great-great-great-grandchildren still don't know what it's like to see women treated equally in society, business, or the law. What an absolute joke. Mars obviously is woke, and now NASCAR no longer fits in with their plans for net zero and women equality, equity, blah, 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 all that crap. So now they're going to leave the sport, a sport that they've been a part of for the better part of 30 years. And I love how they talk about being healthy. You make chocolate and candy, for Christ's sake. Are you really, really going out of your way to make sure people and the planet is healthy? Shut up. But this is an absolute joke, and that's why everyone is trashing ESPN. That's why everybody's trashing Bubba. That's why everybody's trashing the NFL, the NBA, LeBron James. You name it. We all know the saying, go woke, go broke. Bubba Wallace is a trash, garbage heap of a human being. He's a liar, a fraud, and ESPN is right there with him. Bubba Wallace was not a victim. ESPN continues to lie. They will continue to bleed viewers just like CNN, just like MSNBC, just like all those newspapers, just like so many people in the mainstream media have done. They can lie all they want, but real people like myself and anybody listening to this, we all see right through it. So thank you, NASCAR, ESPN, and Darrell Wallace Jr. for killing a sport built on a rebellious attitude, built by legends like the Pettys, the Earnhardts, the Jarretts, the Allisons, and so many more. I'm real interested to see what the ratings on TV are like this year with this kind of crap floating around. Well, I think that is going to do it for this episode of TV's Rob is Unwoke. I hope you enjoyed the ride. I know you're probably facepalming and banging your head against something. I hope you made it all the way through. We made it through together. If you'd like to comment on this, feel free to hit me up on Twitter at TV's Rob Official, or you can leave a message at anchor.fm/TV's Rob is Unwoke. I'll play some of those messages if you leave them. And if you want to come on and you want to talk about this, hit me up on Twitter. I'd be more than happy to have you on. Thank you to executive producer Ryoga. You can follow him on Twitter at Cat Ryoga. And thank you to my lovely, beautiful wife, Nikki. You can follow her at DFW Radio Girly on Twitter. I'm TV's Rob. This is TV's Rob is Unwoke, and I'll catch you next time.